Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at, ladies and gents. I am Kure Isagami, your resident Tinkerer and Medarotter, and welcome back to class with yet another episode of my Robattle Studies 102 curriculum. It's in this specialized playlist that you'll be getting a lot more in-depth insight and explanations around the mechanics that make Medarots and ultimately Medarot S tick, ranging from raising parts and metals, to ascending them, to natures and passives, or any other particular mechanic or screen or menu that I feel needs to be going into a little more in-depth explanation as to what exactly it is, how it works, and how it benefits you. This particular lesson is going to be focused primarily on the MedaSearch, which is a brand new feature that was introduced in January of 2024 for timed deployment type missions. There have been a number of questions around how exactly this works, what its bonuses are like, or how it's collected, and a lot of other questions around how exactly the rewards that they offer with it are, and just exactly how lucrative they can be. That, in particular, is the entire core essence of this lesson specifically, titled MedaSearch: The Lucrative Deployments. Now, starting up here, so people are going to ask, what is MedaSearch? Because, like I said, it is a relatively new mechanic that has been around in the game since the January 18th, 2024 patch. You can find it right there, that little blue button on your home screen at any given time. It is basically a performance system where you can deploy Medarots on timed deployment missions for passive income, quote-unquote, for resources, and even harder to collect resources that are actually not very easily found, earned, or even found at all in more conventional farming, or even in some events, such as Metagist or Medarotter banner tickets, or anything else of the like. It can be immensely lucrative if done right, but like I said, there are a number of questions exactly on how exactly to navigate the menu and what exactly is available to you, and why is it so lucrative? So that's what we're going to be going into here in just a minute. As I said, right here, this little blue button here in this top corner will be your access to the MedaSearch deployment menu. And that menu specifically is going to be very easy to follow and very easy to understand. Here you'll have a lot of buttons here, each one with a particular tile matching to the terrains that we all know and love that have been in Medarot S since launch. The particular notable traits to pay attention here are items A through D. Item A there in that top right corner, that bar there with the sonar, is the number of deployments that you have or can deploy at any given time. If you are not a MetaPass holder and you're just a casual player, you will cap out at 3 deployments per day, or maximum 3 at any time. If you're a MetaPass holder, which gives you access to additional perks and bonuses every month that you renew, you have an extra +1 that you can use. Now, every once in a while, they will actually release an event where they will actually boost the MedaSearch capacity by an extra +1. This means that if you are a casual player, you will have 4 deployments you can send out at any given time. If you are a pass holder, you will have a maximum of 5. Item B is the total number of SP, or search points, that you have accumulated over the course of your savings. As you see, they cap primarily at 12,000, with particular milestones at 4K, 8K, and of course 12K there at the very end. Now, it is actually possible to exceed that limit just by a little bit if you do end up going over that 12K on your final push, but it usually is encouraged you stay under that 12K or even right at it when you do choose to save and accumulate your points. Item C is the Search Point Redemption Store, which I will be going to in just a little bit more detail later, because that's the more controversial element through this entire mechanic. But that is where you'll be able to redeem your SP for parts, and you heard me right, parts, or even other resources, or even Medarotter Gacha tickets, like I said. And item D there at the very bottom right is to collect all current deployments that have completed their missions. Now, you can actually tap each one of these particular when they complete to finish them all individually, but if you'd rather just collect them all at once, that button is there for you. Now, as I said, as you see here, these particular 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 buttons, as you see here, are basically one for each kind of terrain that is available to us. Now, the particular difference is item number 11, which is the cyber terrain, will not always be available at any given time. That one will typically open at the same time the specialized events do that give you an extra deployment. So typically it'll be everything but cyber, as you see here, and basically it's just going to be a test to make sure you've been paying attention to terrain compatibility. Now, moving forward, though, after you select a terrain in particular area that you want to deploy to, the rewards in particular are actually quite lucrative when you do finish your deployments. Some of these missions, some of these rewards, as you see here, is the NFRP S chip, which is that red chip up in the top left corner. This is the most notable reward that you'll be getting from this specific mechanic, and this chip, in this chip specifically, is what you use to farm and collect for raising parts from 5-star to 6-star. And it's going to be a relatively expensive material to collect, so being sure you stay on top of that is a very important matter anytime that basically you log into the game and set your deployments, even as you do your dailies. Other rewards that you will see kind of sprinkled in and out through there at random based on how long the deployment is and just what kind of bonus level bonuses you get out of that can include Metagist, Medarotter books, Cyplasium, ROMs, and even NFRP chips, as standard NFRP chips to a point as well. So this is the very reason that it can be seen as very lucrative, because while a good chunk of these rewards, such as say the standard NFRP chips or the blue Cyplasium, which is far more common as a reward, or even occasionally a Medarotter book every once in a while. A lot of the harder ones, like the rarer color books, the ROMs, the purple Cyplasium, or the Metagist in particular, the NFRP S chip, you're basically guaranteed if you do the higher timed missions as well. This is where you're going to be getting more of those relatively consistently on and off, but it also kind of depends on the rewards you're looking for and if they decide just to give them to you for that particular completion. Now, once you select a particular terrain that you're going to be deploying a mission on, you're going to be seen with this screen right here. Now, it's going to be very similar to your standard parts selection screen in your parts library, but the difference here in particular is that MedaSearch requires and demands that you use pure sets only. So you will not be able to use your customized bots from your team. You can't mix and match to kind of force terrain. Whatever the force bot is all you're going to get to it. And it also will scale your bonuses relative to the overall average level of the pure set, which is, are all the parts raised to their highest level, or are they kind of falling behind somewhere? And it will also scale your bonuses additionally based on how well the legs are compatible with the terrain you're deploying them to. As you see here, just as example with Particle specifically, she has a level 5 bonus for the pure sets and a level 3 for the terrain bonus. But given that it's cyber, it is kind of a given here, in particular with the screenshot. As you see here, the way to kind of break down those bonuses as to what kind of bonuses you'll expect through your pure sets. Any pure sets between levels 1 and 59 will give you a level 2 average bonus for the pure sets. 60 to 74 is a level 3, 75 to 89 is a level 4, and anything from 90 to 100 is a level 5. For terrain bonuses, it's going to be a little easier to tell overall, because if you already have an idea or even a semblance of an idea on terrain as a whole, this is going to be kind of common sense. You really don't want to shoot up under a certain terrain compatibility, but it's a little pickier to a point if you want to maximize those bonuses. In terms of terrain, anything C or D rank will not net you a bonus whatsoever in this, so you'll be really hurting on your bonuses or any potential rewards if you send your Medarot on something they are not very good at. Anything B rank, compatibility of B or better will give you a level 1, A rank compatibility at level 2, and an S rank at level 3. So again, it's kind of common sense here. You want to match, say, biped legs with a forest terrain, mountain terrain with your multi-ped legs, aquatic with your sea-based legs, and so on and so forth. Now, you can still technically use other legs such as adapter, which actually still applies, by the way. Any particular leg abilities that give them an extra terrain bonus, such as snow type with a snowy terrain, adapter for A rank across the board, desert type, forester, climber, explorer, anything else of the like, those passives still count. So say for instance Grand Beetle, who has Explorer as a leg ability. If you choose to use him on city terrain, he will be getting that S rank bonus even if he is a bipedal, where other bipedals are getting a even B rank at best. So something else to keep in mind as well when you're selecting bots to send on your deployments. Now, once you've selected a terrain mission and you've selected your particular Medarot to be tackling that said mission, then it's going to ask you how long do you want to deploy them for. You can deploy them for 3 different kinds of time increments between 1 hour, 4 hours, and 12 hours. Now, for the SP that you can earn, which is pretty much the premium currency and points that you'll be saving for, you want to try to capitalize on these wherever possible. So, if you choose to go for the single 1 hour, that is one single SP per completion. 4 hours will give you a 7 SP on completion, and 12 hours at 18 points per completion. So this is kind of where a little bit of the controversy sits in, because even though it is usually easier to go in with all the 12 hours every time you log in, so even at the minimum you'll be getting at least 3 to 4 12-hour deployments a day completed every time you log in. If you want to stay on top of it and try to maximize building up those points as fast as possible, and you plan to log in multiple times a day, for instance, maybe you might find more of a lucrative endeavor in dispatching the 4 hour, or even the 1 hour if you can stay on top of them. It ultimately breaks down to you on how often you want to log in, and if you just want to kind of leave them alone to do your thing, do your dailies, log out, and just kind of call it a day. So these are the SP points that you can earn. Once again, 1 hour will give you 2 SP, I did say that wrong, 4 hours will give you 7 SP, and 12 hours will give you 18 SP. Now, the SP Redemption Shop in particular is going to be the other really big point here in terms of what kind of rewards that you can earn while you are actually accomplishing your completion. You can use these to redeem for different kinds of parts between head, arms, and legs, as well as different rewards. And the resource rewards in particular, just to kind of cover those briefly, include things such as Metagist in larger batches at once, Medarotter gotcha tickets, ROMs, and Cyplasium, I believe, to a point it can also be found in there, as well as other harder-to-find resources in limited capacity. So, if parts aren't really something that you plan to invest in all that heavily, or even something you plan to make use of at all, this can be a very good way to collect some extra of the limited resources that are harder to find. But the biggest controversy around MedaSearch and whether you can determine it as lucrative or a waste of time is kind of in the ability to redeem for parts. Now, you heard me right, you can actually redeem meta parts basically to buy parts for free using your collected SP in this particular store. But I am going to forewarn you that if you do choose to plan to redeem for parts, you will only be able to buy one part at a time, because buying a single part costs you an entire gauge, or 12,000 search points in order to redeem. So it's going to be quite the long haul if you plan to use it for parts. However, the biggest question I see asked of a lot of relatively newer members, but even some of our veterans in particular that are looking at this with quite the large pool of bots that are available in this at any given time, is what kind of parts can I buy or should I buy? Because given that it'll take you approximately 3 to 4, or even 5 months to redeem a full bar of 12k points if you stay on top of it, it's going to be kind of hard to decide because you have to choose very wisely what parts you want. Now, it doesn't give you access to every single pickup bot in the game, but it has a very large pool of models that are pickup that have some very solid and very versatile part opportunities in it. But with that being said specifically, I am also going to take a moment to kind of explain just kind of a handful of the different models in particular that actually have really good viability in different aspects, and just kind of what makes this one over others worth the investment if you do choose to plan to buy parts with it. Now, I will forewarn you, and I will say this once again in closing thoughts, if you're planning to use this to buy full sets and invest it exclusively in this, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to very strongly encourage that you do not bother with the MedaSearch then, because you will burn out far sooner than you will have completed the entirety of a set if that's what you're planning to use it for. And more than likely, the game will probably be long past shut down if that be the case. Now, with all that being said, without further ado, here's just kind of a list of about, if I counted my list here, 14 different bots, and I'm going to kind of go over each of them briefly, of which ones in particular you want to kind of push for, and what parts that you really want to try to focus on when you do choose to plan to redeem for your MedaSearch. Because again, 12k is expensive to buy, so you want to make sure that you're well informed on what parts you want to purchase specifically. The first item, the first model in my list specifically is GDS-01 Artemis, the well-known Golden Goddess type. Now, she's been well known for a lot of reasons, in particular for her very well-diverse coverage as a utility fighter, between Rebirth as a head, a very solid guard shield, laser, a very good laser arm, and arguably one of the most broken float legs in the game for females. Very solid stats, super armor on top of that, and like I said, I'm just going to say it outright, her legs are going to be the biggest piece you're going to want to invest in if you're planning to redeem. It has very good stats, arguably boss type at that, with very good numbers all around, good speed, very solid damage reduction, and a relatively solid evade at that. But the biggest reason in particular is also the fact it has a very good heavy support of about 2 or more, and it also has super armor as a leg ability, which means if these legs are equipped, you are immune up to about 5 or 6 hits or so, based on rank of the part, to any kind of paralyzed ailments. Thunder, Thundershot, Freeze, Tornado, or Hyper Tornado, or anything else of the like, you have outright immunity to these to a specific point, and can very easily tank any kind of enemies in PvP or competitive meta that want to try to stop up your defender, since that's typically what you'll use these legs on, to try to cripple your strategy before you can put up your wall. The legs are absolutely going to be a very big point you want to focus on. The next model in particular in my list is ASR-0 Spinag Manog, the Golden Asura type. Also, much like it is with Artemis, the legs are going to be the really big bonus here as well. Not only is Spinag also capable of TP for extra tune-up points and extra passives, but it also has a very solid leg ability at Shura, which grants damage plus when its user's parts are destroyed. Very solid stats all around as well, and a triple heavy support of 3 on the legs means it's a very diverse leg that can use basically anywhere. Plus, Spinag is also gender N, which means you can use it on males, you can use it on females, and have a very solid versatility no matter how you choose to use it or where you use it. Very solid leg all around, it's one you generally cannot go wrong with using. The third one on the list, and a rather interesting choice when I did open up a survey on what bots a lot of people recommended, is RBY-0 Pigeon Blood, the Ruby type from Medarot 5. In particular, this model was a rather interesting choice between a couple different guards for the head and left arm, relatively fast flight legs despite having no heavy support, but the biggest reason people wanted to highlight Pigeon Blood specifically is the right arm specifically, which is Destroy. Now you're probably asking me, why is Destroy all that useful if you can get it in a lot of different places? And you're most certainly not wrong. However, Pigeon Blood in particular has a melee variant of Destroy, which is actually a little harder and a little rarer to see depending on the situation. And given that she is a female model, it does give a little more variety and the ability to shield bust a whole lot easier to anyone that is a non-meta change type shield. It's generally not a part you're going to invest in absolutely as high priority, but if you need something for extended coverage, especially for your female models or even as a filler part, this is one that I have seen a lot of people vouch for as a very solid part to keep in your libraries. The next model in particular is SFJ-02 Fukoto Kora Ofu, the crane type from the 7 Lucky God series. This one in particular has been the master of speed and basically the definition of a melee glass cannon, with the ability to revive fallen allies with the head, the ability to scale damage relative to a target proximity, or even push the target away from him with slash or blow away. The biggest part on him specifically, much like a good chunk of the models thus far, is the legs. Arguably probably one of the fastest flight legs in the game as of current, and the leg ability of Climber also means it's going to be flying circles around anyone in mountain terrain, where other flight legs may be relatively close in terms of speed, but not have the terrain advantage that Fukoto might, because it'll have an extra terrain mastery at S rank, and arguably one of the few flight legs that has an average mobility of over 1,000. The next model in particular is TND-0F Gatsurin, the Hurricane Tornado type. Now in particular, this model has been a rather interesting choice as well by the community, and specifically this one in particular has been widely hailed and appreciated specifically for her arms. Does not matter which arm. because the ability to fire off a tornado on either arm you pick will always give you a very nice variety part that you can use, especially on female teams for your tornado anti-air spamming. This can include any particular PvP teams or female-specific teams you want to do tornado anti-air spam with. This gives you an extra opportunity of variety to be able to use that in your team if you are being limited, such as say to female bots only or no males allowed or something of the like. Gotchudin, either arm you pick, can be very useful to have in your libraries. The next model in particular that was widely hailed is MCL0 Milgnus, the Archangel type based off of Archangel Michael. Now, this model is also particularly and very fairly aggressive too, and you could honestly pick any part of him and not really go wrong. Flame on the head for DOT and damage plus with DOT, right arm of Sujigiri for stabbing anyone in the back for bonus points, blow away on the left arm for your crowd control, but the legs and specifically was the widely hailed part that a lot of people like to focus on. It's a float leg, so a lot of people do tend to appreciate it for that particular stat, but it also has relatively good stats across the board, and the leg ability of Trap Buster is also very handy as well. While you may not see people use traps too terribly often, in my personal opinion, in the rare instance that they do choose to, or that they do try to, such as say shoot trap for coverage against max shots or anything else of the like, or even disturbance for your non-combat types, float legs with Trap Buster means you'll be able to have no trouble on any terrain you fight on, and the ability of Trap Buster does also grant you the opportunity to remove any traps that do come in your way, so you can remove them without them actually causing trouble or having to brute force it into expiration. The next model also chosen by the community is GGR0 Gentleheart, the Golem type. Now, this model in particular isn't necessarily as, say, viable in terms of multiple parts you can use at once, but the particular part that is widely hailed on Gentleheart specifically is the legs. Normally, I tend to grade tank legs just a little harshly compared to most others, but it still has some very solid viability. Gentleheart in particular has heavy arms, which means that for every heavy part equipped up to 3, all of his leg stats go up multiplicatively. So if you fully stack that model up with triple heavy parts, even with tank legs with relatively low overall stats, you can comp that pretty easily, and very easily might I add, to even comp the low base speed that comes with most tank legs and still keep the passive stackable 30% damage reduction that you do get with those. The next model is CKN0 Crimson King, the drumstick-wielding chicken type that has inflicted PTSD on all veteran Medarotters of the days come by. This one in particular is a rather unique model in particular, because you can pick basically any part of him and not really go wrong. The head and both arms are destroy, which actually gives the very same argument that you can do for Pigeon Blood. So you can pick either arm or the head and basically free non-heavy melee destroy, which also is relatively rare and hard to come by, for basically coverage against any kind of shields if you want to keep a shield buster in there, as long as they're not a non-meta change type, and very good flexibility. The flight legs also mean he has very high base mobility as well, very solid evade as well as expected of flight leg, but the leg ability of elusive is also very solid too, as it means as long as his evade is higher than the incoming attackers, he does get an extra damage reduction to kind of help keep his damage on the low, even if as a flight leg his defenses aren't necessarily the greatest compared to most others. The next model that people did widely highlight is SFJ03 Ibisu Shichifuku, the aquatic lucky god of the 7. This one in particular has a lot of very widely versatile parts as well, among others on this list. The head for fight full charge for any of your Metaforce reliant nuking builds, even if you are willing to tank the damage over time effect that you do clock with that. Armor Drain on the left arm may not be super handy, but pairing the head with Beam Sword on the right can be a very nasty combo as well. But the biggest piece you want to focus on specifically is either the heads for that full charge, like I said, or the legs. Now, a lot of aquatic legs and good aquatic legs are honestly really hard to come by. So Ibisu here honestly fills a lot of holes, and it fills a lot of checkboxes for having very good speed, great evade, and solid stats all around, and able to keep terrain mastery on one where a lot of other fighters have to kind of really build around having a naturally lower speed. With Ibisu's legs, you really don't have to sacrifice that. Plus, with the leg ability of Through Fight, this gives you an extra edge for any of your melee fighters that have to fight on aquatic terrain. So head and legs for Ibisu is something that you really can't ever go wrong with using for very solid versatility between your Metaforce reliant fighters and for the need to fight on aquatic terrain where a lot of models, even other float legs, have to sacrifice in order to maintain just some semblance of a terrain compatibility. The next model is KOL00 Suicide, the penultimate final boss from Medarot Navi. Now this model in particular is actually pretty nasty all around. It's basically the definition of heavy chunk with the armor. Its overall power is actually quite solid as well with the sword on the right arm, zero gravity on the head part for being able to basically negate any terrain compatibility and convert any enemies to compatibility to D rank upon inflicting. Needle guard on the right arm if you are able to use it for that to reflect damage at half intended back to enemies even if you only get one charge. But the legs, much like it is with most others here, is going to be the really big highlight you want to focus on. Multi-legs with high fly means he has arguably some of the best base stats before any other modifiers come into play. His legs are immensely chunky in terms of damage reduction and armor, relatively solid base mobility as well, and the only real pain point Zero Suicide's legs have is evade. And he makes it very clear that evading is definitely not his game at all. But if you pair High Fly with that, which is 30% boost to all leg stats, 32 if it's 6-star, that honestly gives you an extra free passive as well, but you have to pay very, very close attention to anyone using gravity attribute skills. So make sure you can pay very close attention to that. And even more so, because the legs also have triple heavy support at a slot of 3. So make sure you pay just a little bit closer attention to that, but these legs are honestly one of the much higher tier you want to focus on if you plan to redeem for this one specifically. The next model in particular is CRW0 Crow Tengu. Now this one has a couple other parts as well you could redeem for pretty solidly and not have any particular drop in variety or versatility. For Crow Tengu specifically, Gatling on the head might be okay, but not super viable or useful. Having Tornado on either arm kind of puts him in the same tier as Gats Hurin, which also has Tornado on either arm, so very solid for fights where you have to make use of Tornado and anti-air spam, but also limited to melee male bots or even gender and male bots specifically. And Flight Legs will also put him in the same tier as Fukoto Kuraofu. Very high base mobility and evade as expected of Flight Legs, and much like it is with Fukoto, also has the ability of Climber as well. So he may not be nearly as fast as Fukoto, but also just as viable if you want to make sure that you can keep speed as an advantage on just most terrains that Flight Legs are already very good on, and also on mountain terrain where you are absolutely going to be sailing circles around them. The next model is SFJ04, Bisha Mokubera, another of the Lucky Gods series in particular, if you are kind of noticing a pattern here. This one in particular also is a very solid model of the 7 Lucky Gods as well, featuring very solid tank-type legs, very in the same kind of vein as Gentleheart as well. However, unlike Gentleheart, who has heavy arms, Bisha Mokubera also has Hidden as a leg ability, which means for every unused heavy slot on the legs, gives you one extra head charge that you can make use of. However, that's not the only particular part you can make use of. He's also very fast on his tank legs and relatively solid defenses as well, as expected of tank legs. So even though you do have a non-existent evade as expected, you are not sacrificing your overall speed with a very solid base number and very good damage reduction as well. However, a lot of people also like to say that the head on Bisha Mokubera is very good as well for that ability of Sujigiri, which, for a friendly reminder, is ×3 damage bonus and piercing if you attack an opponent in their cooldown phase. Basically, stab them in the back for an ultimate damage punish just for being able to turn their back to you. The other arms of Pile and Hide Blow are also relatively nice to have as well if you need them, but the head and arms specifically of this one are honestly one you really can't go wrong with. The next model specifically is LWT-01 Mizrash Levia, the upgraded Leviathan type. Now this is a model you can pick basically any part of, the head, the arms, or the legs, and not go wrong with, because it is a very versatile model that has a lot of parts that you will see in a lot of competitive meta. Non-heavy perfect guard on the head means it's a very solid defense type slot you can fit basically anywhere. Hyper Freeze on either arm if you want to get aggressive with your stun locking with free Pierce, even if you cannot dodge or defend in the cooldown. Sea Legs with very solid base mobility, very good evade and solid damage reduction as well, and the leg ability of Elusive does also mean that with its very high base evade, anyone that does try to damage it will have a much harder time actually making anything stick, because he's not only going to be very dodgy as a Sea Leg, but also because of that high dodge, anyone who's not capped over his dodge will already be facing a lower damage output anyway. So this is a model of the entire list of these bots that I'm listing that you can pick any part from and not go wrong. And the very final model of this list of highlights is KXK03 Black Cruise, the newest and latest model of the KXK series. Now this model in particular is built with HP control in mind, but unlike any other model of the KXK series. Between a substitute for the head, contract for the legs, and revenge sword and max shot for arms means you can use this model very solidly. But we are not talking about pure sets. The best in slot part you want to focus on if you are redeeming from anything from Black Cruz is the max shot arm or her left arm. To explain max shot briefly, it does double damage and piercing if the part's HP is at strictly 100%. Otherwise, it is basically your love-tapping pea-shooting rifle, nothing special added to it. And max shot is something that you see incredibly commonly in current competitive meta, whether it be current PvP teams of any no-holds-barred, or especially with female teams specifically with no male or no gender and allowed. Black Cruise allows you to keep max shot as a very solid choice and make very solid use of it and kind of building around it with your parts and your heavy slots depending on how you choose to use it. So these are the ultimate bots here if you choose to go after any of them specifically and the part specifically you want to focus on when redeeming. To redeem that list one final time, it is Artemis, Spanag Manog, Pigeon Blood, Fukoto Kodaofu, Gatsurin, Milgnus, Gentleheart, Crimson King, Ibisu Shichifuku, Zero Suicide, Pro Tengu, Bisha Mokubera, Mizrash Levia, and Black Cruise. So a very solid list of parts that you can go through and why, just of my general knowledge and overall behaviors and even community feedback before putting this episode together. Now just some closing thoughts to wrap us all up, because that was kind of the big crux of most of what is MedaSearch and what to redeem from it. But just to kind of wrap up this whole tutorial and lecture in just 3 specific points here, MedaSearch is designed to take time. This is something that you can't just do one and done in 1 or 2 months and basically expect to buy a whole bunch of parts from. This is something that's going to be very heavily invested in the long game. So if you want to rush it at all by any means, and that is a very loose definition of the term rush, you can focus on the 4-hour missions in favor over the 12-hour ones, but this also requires you to stay on top of them as you are going after your deployments. You can also dispatch them 12 hours every time you log in, so if you choose to do this more casually, just as you do your everyday logins and your dailies, just kind of focus on dispatching all your MedaSearch, go for the 12-hour, and then before you sign out, and just basically call it a day. So by the time you go to log in the next time, they're already done, you collect your rewards, and send them off again. And during events where they give you an extra +1 and the cyber terrain as an opportunity, take advantage of that. If you are a non-pass holder, like I said, you have a maximum of 3. Pass holders get an extra +1 for a total of 4. Whenever they hold these events, it'll be a 4 and 5 respectively. Take advantage of these during the weeks that they do open that up. Now, the other big point here is do not invest in this solely for parts. I cannot emphasize this enough. And even in my beginner's guide, which, I will be reading from word for word to kind of narrate this in particular, saving to 12k is a long grind, and you will burn out well before you reach that 12k to buy all 4 parts of a set. Pick parts you need, not sets that you plan to collect. So anyone that say might be missing a parts, you can use it as a pure set, might be passable, but this is something that to redeem for parts that you absolutely need, no ifs and buts, period. Make sure you keep that at the forefront of your mind. Now, for parts that you particularly don't really care for or don't really care to use this for parts, you can also use Medarotter tickets, books, and even limited time Metagist as well to raise other resources. Now, to read off my beginner's guide as well for just my overall thoughts on MedaSearch and using it for parts. A fair warning. If you are planning to use this to collect full sets of Medarots that you want, I am going to stop you right there and tell you not to bother with MedaSearch. While it is technically possible to do so, it is far too lofty of a goal to be considered feasible, especially if you are a greenhorn fresh from training and still learning the ropes of the game. Instead, here is a recommendation from your old pal Kura, so you can peruse a list of parts that you're missing from the shop, and if you wish to redeem parts for it specifically, you can pick one part. You can refer back to the list that I said that you're missing, and you can set that as your goal. Now, as you're working toward that goal every day you log in, collect the reward for the previous deployments, reassign them, and just keep it going with your dailies. If enough time passes, one of two things will happen. The gacha banner for that particular set will be rerun, or get a boosted rate on that particular week, and give you a proper shot to collect them properly. Roll in that banner as necessary and as you have the rubies for. And if you're lucky, you will pull that part or even the whole bot just to make it easy for. Now, if you do collect that part or set, you can delegate the rest of your currently collected search points for something else that you're waiting on and trying to invest in. Now, the other thing is the gacha banner for that particular set will be rerun, and if you fail to collect them or get the part in question, you can still use your collected skill points and keep investing toward that part as your ultimate goal. Now, MedaSearch, as one final reminder, is not for collecting pure sets at a time. This is best for collecting specific parts of sets that you feel are most important or needed for your team comps, or for completing sets that you're missing parts for the sake of completion to use as pure sets very full time. Manage your goals and expectations accordingly before beginning the deployments. Now, the final point is to build pure sets. Now, deploying does not disable the bots from use. I'm going to also assure you to this. So say, for instance, if you have Particle and Dispatcher on the forest terrain for 12 hours, you can still use Particle or her parts in your team builds as you go through your dailies. And pay attention to terrain matching. This is very obvious and goes without saying. If you're already a Medarotter worth their salt, you already know to pay attention to this anyway. It simply serves as a friendly reminder to pay very close attention to this as you are assigning and deploying bots for your extra bonuses. But with all that being said, this was a little bit more of a longer-winded lesson, but I did have to go into detail specifically, especially over the bots that had the best recommendations over what parts to go after. But if you'd like to know more, I am going to officially dismiss class. Thank you guys so much for stopping in and staying in here with me. If you'd like to know more, you can follow us below on Facebook at the Medarot News Network page, or the Metabots Forever community on there that do also run and manage. You can also join us on Discord in the link provided and in the comments below to keep an even closer ear to the ground on the action. This includes any new links to merchandise, fan art, contests, my episodes, or my tutorials, or anything else of the like. That's the first place you're going to see them released before it goes anywhere else across the net. And you can also reach out to me personally on Twitter at IsaGamiKura. So if you have any questions or feedback or comments, or would love to stop in and say hello, I leave my DMs open on purpose for that very reason. So if there is something specifically that you'd like to have me cover in my 102 curriculum, or even just something that you think I need to that I could clarify on in the comments if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But with that being said, I am going to officially dismiss class here. Thank you again for stopping in, and as always, I do appreciate you all for stopping in and staying with me. And until next time, this is your host, Kura Isagami of the Medarot News Network, signing out.